This week on Quality Digest Live, want to please more customers more of the time? Try self-directed work teams.
And, well, better late than never. Here we are. All right, another story. Plus, it is what it is, except when it isn't. That and more when we come back.
TrackWise by Sparta Systems enables quality, manufacturing, and regulatory affairs professionals to streamline processes, consolidate redundant systems, and reduce manual operations for increased revenue. Visit spartasystems.com.
Welcome back to Quality Digest Live for February 17th, 2012. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Mike Richmond, publisher of Quality Digest.
And I'm Quality Digest editor-in-chief. Dirk
right.
Ducharme, coming to you from the wrong side of the tracks in our beautiful headquarters in Chico, California.
World headquarters.
That's right. Our top news story this week comes from Faro and Geomagic. Geomagic has announced that its COO, Tom Kurke, along with Michael Weinberg, staff attorney for public knowledge, will be presenting at this year's Faro 3D Documentation Conference in Orlando, February 21st through 22nd.
Next week.
The session is going to be titled, "It Will Be Awesome If They Don't Screw It Up."
Great title.
Bringing IP issues in digital documentation into focus. This particular talk is going to address questions about intellectual property rights and how they can affect the things that you capture, modify, and make in 3D. This is kind of a burgeoning legal field because with the ability to do 3D scans and 3D printing, it's opening up a lot of new issues. So Kurke and Weinberg are going to explain the complex and sometimes basically nonsensical legal landscape which intersects with object and scene-based 3D capture workflows. So it's going to answer or address such questions as, what is intellectual property? Okay. Can you copyright a building since you can actually scan it?
Right.
Who owns public spaces? What if you capture a sculpture?
Right.
Do you have the right to this is a good one. Do you have the right to manufacture replacement jigs for a production process you did not create? Can a building be a sculpture? So according to the presenters, sometimes the answers are going to make sense, and sometimes basically you're going to be scratching your head going, what the heck?
Well, this is, like you say, it's a burgeoning field, and this really didn't exist not that many years ago. These issues didn't exist. So.
Well, exactly. I mean, and so that's the whole problem, is now you have the capability, and talking about, let's say, the jig that you were talking about. So suppose you manufacture, you have a process that you didn't create, you have a jig that maybe you purchased, a fixturing jig, that sort of thing that you purchased from a machine company or whatever to hold your part for scanning or whatever, and you decide, hey, I need another one of these,
right?
Or maybe this one's broken.
Yeah.
So hey, I've got all this. I can do 3D scanning. I can do 3D printing. Well, what the heck? I'll just scan it and make an exact replica of it.
Do you have the right to do that?
Do you have the right to do that?
Right.
It's a good question.
Yeah.
So that is the fascinating thing to me today, is just that you have this capability to do all this with 3D scanning and printing. So, and that just brings up the whole issue. What are the legalities? And that is what this conference, part of what this conference by Faro is going to talk about. So
interesting stuff. Interesting stuff. Thanks, Dirk. Okay, another news item which caught our eye this week comes from the London-based professional services firm PricewaterhouseCoopers. That's a mouthful. According to a survey that the firm recently conducted among more than 1,200 CEOs, the global economic outlook for the coming year is decidedly mixed. Nearly half of those surveyed feel that the international economy will decline in 2012 versus just 15% who expect to see worldwide growth. However, there are glimmers of optimism here too. CEOs, of course, are a personally confident bunch in general, and 40% of them expect their own companies to post revenue growth this year. More than half of those responding anticipate adding headcount, which is another positive sign. Now, yeah, I mean, CEOs, as we say, they're optimistic folks, right?
Yeah.
So what the survey is saying is that half of them, almost half of them, anticipate that the global economy is going to go down.
Right.
But almost half of them feel that their personal companies are going to increase revenue and add headcount.
Yeah, everybody's going to hell in a handbasket
except for us. That's right.
We're doing great.
That's why CEOs are CEOs. They have that optimism. So, speaking of optimism, it waxed and waned according to sectors and markets. CEOs in industries such as entertainment and media right here, mostly expected increased revenues and expanded hiring. On the other hand, those in Western Europe were particularly pessimistic, and that's not a surprise given the debt crisis that's currently paralyzing economic capitals across that continent. Of course, we've been reading a lot about that. Speaking of Europe, the results of the survey were announced at the World Economic Forum occurring in Davos, Switzerland in late January. So for more information on the survey, be sure to check out the story link below the player page right here.
That's it. And by the way, if you're the CEO of one of our advertisers, the economy is doing great. It's awesome. Now's the time to buy.
That's right. Thank you, Dirk, for that PSA. Okay.
Always willing to help ourselves. Okay. So our first feature story this week
self-directed work teams.
Self-directed work teams.
That's right.
Building perfection. Self-directed work teams deliver on quality. This was kind of a let's be honest, a self-promotional piece from Connecticut Spring and Stamping. Sure. This is a company that makes precision metal parts, and the article basically talks about how they used self-directed work teams in order to improve their processes and make themselves a little bit more lean, a little bit more efficient, so on and so forth.
Great case study.
And it is a good case study. It actually is, even though it's, hey, let's say it's self-promotional, it's very well written, and it really does kind of show the value of self-directed work teams and give some really good solid examples of how this particular company used them in a couple of instances. But what I really want to talk about is just self-directed work teams in general. So for those of you who don't know, if you've been around in quality long enough, you've heard self-directed work teams probably 20 years ago. The concept has been around for a really long time and probably really came to the forefront when Kimball Fisher wrote his best-selling book, Leading Self-Directed Work Teams, back in 1993. But even there, he admitted that the idea had been around for decades before that. So basically, a self-directed work team is defined as a group of employees who combine different skills and talent, essentially to work without managerial supervision in order to pursue a common goal, in order to further the interests of the company, but basically hands off.
And the idea here is the fact that they have the knowledge. They're the ones that really understand the processes that they're working in. They're the ones that are best positioned to improve them.
Right, and actually we're going to get into that a little bit. You've kind of touched on it, the kind of extending that definition a little bit more. With a self-directed work team, management's job is to set the initial objectives and then provide the resources the team needs to accomplish them, right? So the team is free to develop its own supporting objectives, whatever they need to get themselves going, steps for the overall objective, let's say, to get 100% on-time delivery of product to their customers with 100% quality, right? The team gets together frequently, decides on achievable goals, and then within their own environment works toward continuous improvement to accomplish those goals. So, like you said, the management kind of is the support network. Matter of fact, here's a quote. I was just going to there's actually have a quote here I want to read, which really touches on this. This is from the story. In short, management gives them, the self-directed work team, the direction and support, and then lets them loose. It says all the employees who do not touch parts are there to help and support those who do. The belief is that focusing on helping and supporting the people who make and deliver the parts will make the whole company be more successful. So this is, like you mentioned, this is really a case study that what this particular company did. Now, if you think about it, it makes, to me, when I was thinking about this article, it really made sense on a couple of levels. Number one, if you just think about how you yourself work, when you're at home on the weekend, you've got a project you want to do, maybe it's a hobby, or maybe it's something you need to do around the house. Maybe your wife has a project for you. It's a project, do-it-yourself project you want to do. You take ownership of it. You decide, what do I need to get this done? How much time do I need to do it? How much money is it going to take? And then you set about what you feel is the best way to get it done. Because of that, you have complete buy-in into the quality of the work you're going to do, because it's really a reflection of your own energy and output, right?
Right.
No reason why this doesn't work for a team as well. When you set a team loose and say, okay, this is your puppy, here's the goals I need from you, this is what you need to do, but You guys are free to, within certain constraints, to just go out and do it. You know best how to do it, so go do it. That gives, then the team is completely bought into the process because it becomes their process, and the outcome becomes their outcome. And I think there's a lot of just intrinsic personal value in that for the employee.
There is, and it's really an issue of strategy versus tactics, and many times management wants to control both of those things. They want to dictate what the strategy is going to be, and that's fine. Management should obviously have control of overall strategy of the organization, but they also many times want to dictate the tactics. Okay, we want to get here, and here's how we're going to direct you to get there, and here are all the mile markers along that path that you've got to hit. And many times, again, management may not be all that aware of intrinsically the obstacles or the opportunities that come along that path. So those that are working it really can better take advantage of those tactical opportunities as they present themselves.
And there's another thing about this that's really interesting. It's, and this is my perspective, they don't talk about this in the article per se, but my perspective, it's self-policing.
Yes. Peer
pressure is amazing. And they did give an example, they didn't really put it self-policing this way in the story, but one example they gave is, and it actually kind of surprised me, they talked about how one particular team posted each operator's production numbers. I mean, yow, right? I mean, so the goal, let's say the goal was to produce 200 parts per hour. Every person on that team could see what each operator was under, whether they were over, and so then the question becomes, well, if an operator wasn't producing as well as the others, is it because they need more training? Do they need better tools? And I'm assuming then they would pass that information up to management saying, look, you know, this person needs some more training, or, you know, they don't really have the tools that they need and everybody else does.
Or maybe they solve it within the team. Maybe the team itself will solve it.
And that was exactly my point. Yeah. Sometimes, even if you have great tools, I mean, not everybody works the same. Some people work fast. I mean, some people are lickety-split. Some people are more methodical and slower, and it's not a matter of training. It's not a matter of tools, but the team works it out. Because what happens? I mean, management comes in and says, well, obviously you're an underproducer, and either we're going to, you know, can your rear, or, you know, we're just going to beat on you harder because I'm sure that's going to make you work faster, right?
Red bead experiment.
Yeah, the red bead experiment, exactly.
Sure.
So what the team does, and I've been on teams like this, the team decides, look, this person in this position isn't furthering our goals, but they have skills. Sure. So let's move them out of that position. Let's let them do this. They're more suited to this. Maybe this isn't as time sensitive a position. Here they don't have to produce 200 widgets a day. They only need to do 50 operations a day. They're still just as critical. They're still just big a part of the team. But the team decides that. And what struck me about this is that if you've ever been on a production line, the manager, even the nicest manager in the world, right? The manager comes onto the production line and says, well, you know, this is going on, you guys need to do this, you need to do that, maybe doesn't really have the knowledge. They kind of listen, yeah, boss, okay, sure, yeah, we'll get right on it, right? Okay. And then they go about and do it their own way. It's just, no. You give them the power to do it. The team is going to self-organize. I believe the team, if you let them, is going to self-organize. They're going to move their peers where they need them to be, because teams tend to value their peers. Unless you're a schmuck. I mean, if you've seen it, teams really, really are cohesive. And if somebody from the outside the team, a manager comes in and starts to pick on a team, that team will rally around that person. So it's like, my feeling is really, if you got good employees, you just let the team decide what works.
Right.
And by the way, last thought. I know I've been rambling on this for a minute. Okay. If I say organizational structure, and I give you a pyramid.
Mm-hmm.
What's at the top?
The managers, the CEO.
And what's at the bottom?
The line workers. Sure.
And this struck me last night. I'm going, wow, wait a minute. That's actually completely backwards. From an organizational point of view, sure, but from a what the company actually does point of view,
right,
it is completely flipped.
Why would that CEO direct the details of how to
exactly
operate?
The management and the office workers and the white shirts, they are all support. They are there to help the production people do their thing so that what comes out the top the pointy end, the part that sticks into the consumer, is the product.
Right.
And the product, it's all driven upward. It's not the other way. The whole thing is completely backwards when you think about it.
Inverted.
We're not pooping product out the end, out the bottom, where the production worker typically is on a pyramid. It's going out the top, right?
Yeah, interesting.
It's been so long since we've talked about self-directed work, and to me it is really exciting because it embodies really what the quality movement, I think, really has become today, even though we don't talk about it necessarily. It's quality is everybody's responsibility, but to have that responsibility, you have to have the power. Yep. And that means you basically have to give power to the people who are doing the job. So,
well, maybe we should talk about it more.
Maybe we should talk about it more. It's a cool subject.
Good piece. Yes, very good piece. Well, very cool subject. Okay, great. Well, we have another piece that I think was very cool, and that was written by our good friend Steve Willett.
Yep.
And the title of the article is "It Is What It Is, Until We Begin to Think Differently." And that was written by Stephen Willett and it appeared in Monday's issue of Quality Digest Daily. Well, it is what it is. Hey, we've all heard this. Steve talks about it in his article. We hear this a lot.
Right.
And what is it? I mean, what is it is what it is? Essentially, it is what it is an expression of futility.
Sounds like Popeye. I am what I am.
I am what I am. It is what it is. But it is what it is an expression of futility. As I said, it basically is people who are working in a process, in this case, in this reference, saying, hey, whatever it is, it's going to be, because we can't affect this. We can't change it. We don't have the power to do it. It's beyond us. We just have to deal with it and accept it. Right. Now, the analogy here that Steve begins the article with is this idea that it is what it is really ties back to the old days of quality. The days of quality where quality was kind of inspected into a product. In other words, stuff would come rolling off an assembly line and it would be inspected and detected, and the stuff that was defective would be quarantined, because the idea at that point in the 40s and before was that, hey, defects are inevitable. It is what it is. Defects are inevitable. They're going to come with the process, and we just have to accept them. What we can do in quality control is that we can look at the output and that we can, again, detect, inspect, segregate, quarantine those products that are bad and ship good products to the customers.
Right.
Okay, that worked just fine. But of course, nothing is static in the world of business. That worked just fine when America was a global superpower in many ways, not the least of which was in manufacturing the economy in the 40s and 50s. Well, as we all know, any of us who are students of history and of history of quality knows, in the 40s and 50s, many American quality gurus, W. Edwards Deming, Joseph Duran, Val Feigenbaum, went over to Japan and had many times had meetings and seminars with Japanese management and really began to implement it and begin to communicate to them these ideas of statistical process control. It wasn't really called that in those days, but the idea of SPC in its genesis, that was really developed Western Electric really was the framework of this in Stewart, even in the days before that. So the Japanese really embraced this, and they bought into the idea that it's not about the product, it's about the process. That was a very big paradigm shift. Very big paradigm shift.
Right.
That it's not about the product, it's not about the output of the product. It is ultimately, but really, quality comes from improving the process. Well, what happened? We all know what happened. In the 60s and 70s, Japan, especially in the automotive industry, really kind of ate American manufacturers' lunch. And by the time of if Japan can, why can't we? It was pretty darn apparent that something was wrong with American quality.
Right.
Well, that ushered in really the era of SPC and what Steve refers to in his article as SPC1, which was statistical process control in the first wave. Really was this idea that you would still inspect and detect product as it came rolling off the lines, but you would then go back and look at the process and try to improve the process based on what you learned from that inspection. Not just segregate it, but actually try to improve the process upstream. Well, that worked better, but it really didn't quite get us there. SBC2 then in the 90s really was about looking within the process at the inputs and to try to not even produce anything that was defective, right? And to understand that we could improve the process itself and analyze that before we even produced anything at all. And there wouldn't have to be defects. See, it's this idea that it is what it is. No, it's not acceptable. It doesn't have to be that way. And the coda of Steve's piece was, okay, it is what it is one way to think about it. The way he referred to it is, it isn't yet, but it will be. That was his coda. And I love that. I love that because it's so much more optimistic, right? That it is what it is.
And also, I'm not sure if you touched it on here, but you can, in the last few years, maybe 10 years, 10 years. They've taken it back even one further is in the whole design process.
Sure.
Forget about the actual, let's get our manufacturing process, design for manufacturability, design for quality. Those ideas are like, look, our design engineers have got to have a good idea of how the freaking product is manufactured so that when they're designing it, the stupid thing can be built. Right, and so that it can be built in such a way that it's error-proofed, or that the assembly portion of it is error-proofed. That it's efficient, it's fast to go together, it's easy to go together, it's easy to come apart.
Sure.
And all this happens actually at the design stage. So more and more, the whole quality concept is being pushed further and further and further and further back, which is where it should be.
Right, and that's really what he's saying. And his point here is that the reason why that's possible is because it was a thought process that changed.
Yeah.
It was, and he talks very lyrically, I think, about this idea of how thoughts become reality, and thoughts influence reality in the world, and in the world of business, and in the world of the world, in our own reality of our lives. And that you can have an idea that if you properly implement it can change the world. And in the framework of quality, that is absolutely the idea. It is what it is not acceptable. Just like defects are not acceptable.
Right.
You don't just say, well, that's the best we can do, and that's all that there is. He gets into it at the end of the article and really talks about living and life, which I think is great, this idea that we've come so far. We've come so far in the world of not only quality and manufacturing, but the world of medicine, the world of electronics and communications. And gosh, all that has happened because we have had this idea that we could change things, that we could make change. And falling back to it is what it is. There's just a couple of words. Hey, let's be honest. I've used them, you've used them, we've all used them.
Yeah, we can't do that, whatever.
Sure, we've always done it that way. Whatever those old comments are that we always fall back on, we've all used those. And really what happens there, I think, is that we're just not thinking when we talk.
Right.
We say these things as a dismissive line or just because we said it a million times before, and we're really not thinking about what that is. But your thoughts become your realities, and your realities become your actions, right? So looking at it is what it is, and turning that around and saying it's not yet, but it can be, is very, very powerful. It's a very powerful way to look at it. Yeah. Well, Steve got, and I'd like to show this if we can.
Sure.
Steve got some really good comments on this article, and if you know Steve, he's very active. He definitely wants to hear your comments. If you read articles from Steve, he will respond. He's one of our columnists that's very good with responding, and he got a couple comments on this piece and he responded to him. So if you see any other pieces from Steve, or this piece in particular, and you want to respond, he will respond to you. Okay, so we got a letter from Ed Johnson, one of our readers, and Ed kind of tied into the historical nature of this, I think somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but his comment was, yep, let's just move on from here. Let's not try to learn from the past the lessons it has to teach. After all, the past cannot possibly repeat itself, right?
No.
Of course. A statement, if it contains knowledge, makes a prediction with a chance of being wrong and fits every observation of the past, I believe is what W. Edwards Deming said. Excellent comment.
Right.
That's very true, because again, it comes down to that idea of our thoughts become our realities. If we're trapped in that, we can't move forward.
Right.
Steve responded to that, I think, in a very correct way with another Deming quote.
Okay.
Steve wrote back, yes, exactly, Ed. Or even more fundamentally, why learn from history if problems are inevitable anyway? Or more subtly, does experience help? No, not if we are doing the wrong things. Experience teaches nothing, which is also stated by Deming.
Like these Deming quote battles. It's fun.
There's millions of them. But you know, the reason why is because he's on it. Deming was on it, and he had that exactly right. It's all about the thoughts that dictate your reality. And if you're trapped in that, you can't move forward. Don't say it is what it is. I'm going to personally try not to say it is what it is anymore. I say it on occasion. I'm going to try to get beyond that. And other little parables or little statements like that, get beyond them. Think about what you're saying, think about what that means, and take the actions appropriately.
Yeah,
that's what this article says.
That was good. Yeah. We hear from Steve. We get an article from Steve about every other month, I think.
Something like that.
He's really good.
Look out for him.
And by the way, in case you don't know, if you see an author you like and you're wondering whether they've written other things, when you're on their article, they're just above the article. There's a list of different things you can do. One of them says Author Archive.
Right.
If you click on Author Archive, that will bring you up every single article on our website that was written by that particular author. So if you like Stephen Ouellette or Don Wheeler or Baldastracci or whoever, click on that, go to one of the articles, click on the author archive, and you can go back and very easily find all the past articles they've written. So nice little tool if you want to use it.
So we had a letter from Steve that we saw. We had another letter that came in this week
from another one of our columnists.
Yes, and this was
so this was an excuse me. This was actually in response to a. We had run an article a little while ago about quality engineers and that sort of stuff, and it was a story about a mom trying to justify her to her daughter her job, you know, and so she was trying very, you know, to explain to a, you know, 5 or 6-year-old what her quality engineer job was. And it was kind of a funny little story. And somebody had written in saying, yeah, why don't they have quality engineer Barbies?
That's right.
And we did a little bit saying, oh, well, you know, they do have quality engineer Barbies. And this is just this is the picture that we ran last week. This is a quality engineer Barbie, and we showed her and said, well, you know, they do have one. We made a joke about maybe how you might accessorize your quality engineer Barbie. And Paul Naismith, one of our columnists, thank you, wrote back, oh man, you guys missed a lot of other things that you should have on the quality engineer Barbie. And these are some of Paul's comments. She needs an Ono circle that she can stand in. She needs to have a 3-inch thick skin, and he added, and it needs to grow each year that she's in the position as a quality engineer.
She is quality engineer.
You need to have a thick skin if you're going to be the ability to bore others with detail about quality standards. And any of you who have spouses, and you know exactly what he's talking about then. And Paul talks about trying to talk to his wife about quality standards. The ninja-like ability to make improvements. So obviously the QE Barbie will wear a ninja outfit.
Of course.
And obviously the one of the accessories she has to have is a demi-metal worn around her neck. I had made a comment also that it's probably not a good idea to wear really tight Lycra pants.
No.
Paul disagreed. He says, you know, Dirk is incorrect about sparkly Lycra leggings being a safety concern. I've been donning them for years. By the way, Paul is a tall, gangly fellow from Scotland.
Scottish.
And I've never had a forklift crash into me. Well, not by accident. Well, Paul, actually, we did find another Barbie that we think will fit you. We call this the Scottish QE engineer.
It's the Mech Barbie.
It's the Mech Barbie.
And
look at the head. It's huge. Look at the cranium. It's gargantuan.
I think that's actually more of a Ken doll, but I think that it's
I like the I do like the demi-metal.
Yes.
I see he is wearing his Lycra leggings. Yes,
thank you.
So there you go, Paul.
Thank you, Paul.
Shout out to your homeland there. So.
Yes, that's the Scottish McBarbie.
The Scottish McBarbie.
We got a Barbie down.
We got a Barbie down here.
So,
all right.
Thank you, Paul, and please keep commenting, because we'll keep busting your chops on that.
Exactly.
Yes. All right. Well, great. All right. Well, that's our show for this week. But before we wrap up,
such as it is.
But before we wrap up, I'd like to thank our sponsor, Sparta Systems. For more than 15 years, Sparta's TrackWise software has enabled professionals to improve processes and increase revenue. Please take a moment to visit www.spartasystems.com to learn more. And if you're interested in checking out an excellent recent webinar titled Managing the Complex Supply Chain Ecosystem, presented by Sparta and moderated by our very own Dirk Ducharme, the on-demand version is available by clicking on the Sparta banner ad just below the player right here.
Right, and coming up next week on the show, we'll have an interview with Industry Week Hall of Famer Norman Bodek. Norman's going to join us to discuss the Harada method, which the Japanese Management Association has called the best day-to-day management system in the world. We're also presenting a special video-based webinar with Norman on February 28th at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. You can register for that free webinar by clicking the link below the player. By the way, if you've never heard Norman speak, the guy is a great speaker. He's dynamic. If you ever have a chance to see him speak live, he's chock full of information and funny to boot.
Very funny. This will be a good, entertaining webinar. It's a live video webinar. You'll be able to see Norman and see Dirk on the show, and that's going to be on the 28th is the webinar. But tune in next week, next Friday on the 24th, because we're going to have Norman right here on the screen share, and we'll chat with him about the Harada method and about the webinar. Okay.
That's right.
Well, great. Well, thank you all for joining us. That's our show again for this Friday. I hope you all have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week.
Okay, so long.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.